Now, more on the rally. We have on the show with us Tindig Pilipinas co-convenor Kiko Aquino-Dee. He will speak about the developments that happened yesterday and the message of the protest. Magandang umaga sa iyo. Welcome back to Morning Matters.
Ay, magandang umaga, Gretchen. Magandang umaga sa lahat mga nanonood po ngayon.
Kiko, unang-una, masaya ba ang Tindig Pilipinas sa turnout yesterday of the rallies? And kamusta naman ang naging experience niyo on your end?
Well, yeah, definitely po. Blown away by the turnout yesterday. I've heard different counts po dun sa bilang ng mga dumalo. I've heard low of 50,000, high of 100,000. Pero this week pa lang po yung assessment namin. And then yun, sunburn notwithstanding, I think and maybe one or two isolated incidents. I think by and large, it was a peaceful protest. Na yun yung that was one of the main priorities that we wanted to make. Na we wanted to express our anger over what was going on, what's been going on as far as corruption is concerned. But we are also committed to doing it peacefully and doing it within the framework of the 1987 Constitution. So I think in terms of those goals, we were quite successful.
Okay. So, just to be clear about the scope of Tindig Pilipinas, kayo yung nag-organize ng rally dito sa Luneta at saka sa EDSA. Tama ba?
Just to be clear po, no? So we organized we were part of the organizers of the Trillion Peso March. The lead organizer po was the Church Leaders Council for National Transformation, led by Bishop Colin Bagaforo. We were in solidarity with the Luneta March. So some of the organizers from Luneta joined us in a press conference last Monday, to give details on both events. But I did not, or my organization did not have a direct hand in organizing yung sa Luneta.
And what did you hope to achieve with the protests over in EDSA, and what was the common message? Kasi yun nga yung parang I mean, is this an anti-corruption rally? Usually kasi when people go out to the streets, there's a clear goal of fighting the incumbents and asking people in power to step down. But in this case, what is the primary goal of these rallies, the primary message?
So I think we really want clear accountability for all of these issues of corruption. No? So as far as the Independent Commission on Infrastructure is concerned, we are less and less enthusiastic about it in its current form because it lacks certain powers to compel people to cooperate. And the composition is very much executive dominated. No? So we'd want to support the legislation in both houses of Congress that creates an independent a permanent independent commission that has subpoena and contempt powers that where civil society can have some participation in the selection of its composition and its proceedings, and that is separate entirely from the executive and legislative once it has been established. No? So I think we're calling for that. We're calling also for a return to the old system where SALNs were freely available and we can access them easily, as opposed to the current situation where the previous ombudsman sort of stonewalled access to SALNs. And I think the really important one is we want to see legal and political accountability. Like, legal accountability means cases being filed, strong cases being filed, names being named. And political accountability means once those names are named, even if the cases are proceeding, I think the mere implication in corruption is enough for voters to say that we shouldn't vote for these people when they return to us to seek our mandate in 2028 or future elections. No? So we're calling for accountability within the framework of the 1987 Constitution.
It's good to see that many people came out to the streets rallying in their own way. Meron mga celebrities that went to EDSA, meron din pumunta sa Luneta, meron din those who did an anti-corruption run, meron din yung mga nag-cycling. I mean, people from different sectors finding their own way, creative way to join the battle cry against corruption. But also there are those who say that each group just accuse their own political enemies of corruption while defending the ones they support. In other words, many of these groups use the rallying cry against their own enemies. If true, how effective do you think would the rallies have been?
Well, at least speaking for the trillion peso march, no, the church made it very clear that the color of the day would be white kasi walang kulay yung katiwalian. There were politicians who attended, but the call of the church was no one will speak on stage because we want to call everyone out. No? So definitely, I think the Marcos administration is first there because they're the incumbent administration. They're the ones in charge while all of this corruption was happening. I think it emerged quite clearly that a lot of the issues on flood control began during the Duterte administration, so they might have caught a lot of fire as well. But if people wanted to call out, it's not something that I would want to do personally. But if people wanted to call out like the Aquino administration or the Arroyo administration, they were free to do so. No, what we were discouraging, or what we were discouraging was voicing anything in support of one political agenda or another. No, so even though, for example, I supported the impeachment towards VP Sara Duterte. I set that to one side for today because the focus had to be calling out corruption in all forms, no, not focusing on one particular entity or another.
But also, if we try to look at it as, I mean, to have a, I mean, if it's too broad, also, you risk not hitting a particular objective, right? So there's quite confusion over what the end goal is of these rallies. If you talk about accountability and if you talk about wanting cases filed, haven't we seen that also back in 2012 when people came out to rally against the pork barrel, which was eventually abolished, but it became something else. It turned into another form. Marami ng insertions ngayon that are billions more than the millions in pork barrel funds. So, I mean, I help me see a tunnel through this. And ano ba yung parang maaaring puntahan nung protest?
So I think 2 points po, no? So first, I think it's a very fair point when you say that when your calls are broad, then it becomes hard to focus down. But I think also it's important to remember that a lot of different groups came together to put the trillion peso march, right? And so coming up with a consensus position requires that kind of dynamic. So while yes, I acknowledge that the broad nature can be counterproductive in some areas in terms of bringing a lot of groups together. I think there's a benefit to be had there as well. But in terms of like what the end game we'd want to see, going back to the 2012 or 2013 million people march, I think what we saw there, aside from the cases filed, aside from the Supreme Court decision, which yes, I think ended up being quite mangled as far as current process is concerned, as far as pork barrel. What we saw was three politicians named, no? So Enrile, Revilla, and Jinggoy. And I think if you look at 2019, which is the election, which was the time they sought re-election, Enrile was kicked out, Jinggoy was kicked out, Revilla hung on 11th, but that's because he was propped up by the Duterte administration, right? He was part of the admin slate. In 2022, similar thing happened to Jinggoy. He was 12th. He was propped up by the Marcos Duterte unity team. So I think in 2028, if there's a clear consensus as far as being upset at corruption, then all of the factions of our politics should turn our backs on these people who may be implicated in the current flood control scandals. And I think what happens is that people will respond to that. If when people see that there are corrupt officials, they do take that into consideration. No, 4 million people changed their minds about Bong Revilla in 2019. No, he was number 1 in 2010. He was number 11 in 2019. 7 million people changed their minds about Jinggoy Estrada in 2019. And I think that's something that we want to build on. No? We want to show people that political accountability I don't want to say is just as important or more important than legal accountability, but it is a way for all Filipinos to say that we are turning our backs on these corrupt politicians.
So when you were there, did you see supporters from different political lines come together and have the same battle cry? I mean, meron din, kasi syempre online lang yung nakikita na babasa namin, no? Merong mga Duterte supporters saying there are liberals who would rather not have the current administration step down because it would pave the way for the vice president to sit as president. Pag ano yung nangyari kahapon? Nakita mo ba nagbaba ng ano, kumbaga parang ng political lines and colors itong mga taong ito or hiwalay-hiwalay pa rin yung mga protesta?
Yeah, I think as far as that's concerned, we're not there yet. No, I think a lot of there was a group that was supporting the call of Chavit Singson for like military junta. I think, which is really, I thought we had left that idea behind in the past in the dustbin of history where it belongs. But there's still people talking about sort of destroying our democracy that way. So that's not something we agreed with. And then on the side of, there was also a group supporting President Duterte, calling on President Marcos to resign. And personally, I think it's within their right to do so. But I also think that we've experienced in our history making a corrupt president resign. And I think that's a fair thing to say. You know, President Estrada was convicted of corruption but pardoned by his successor. But it turned out his successor ends up being quite a bit worse. No, in at least in my assessment as a teenager at the time, quite a bit worse than President Estrada. No? So I think it's clear that calls for resignation don't happen in a vacuum. Though when you ask for someone to resign and you push for someone's resignation, what are what is the end game there? What are the follow-up steps there? And if it's just going to be a Sara Duterte that becomes president, as a result of President Marcos resigning, then we just end up with the same corruption and perhaps even more human rights abuses. No? So I think I really my framework is political accountability, right? I think President Marcos is clearly in charge of everything right now, and I don't think, at least for the last 3 years, he didn't do a very good job stamping down corruption. We'll see in the next few years if he's able to turn that around. But the way he's going right now, I think what will happen in 2028 is that people will realize that it was never a good idea to have a Marcos as president in the first place, and they will vote accordingly come that election. So I want to see that political accountability for the shortcomings of the Marcos administration in 2028.
Well, what do you make of the president being an anti-corruption champion? I mean, he himself has said that if he was not president, he would go down and join the protests. What do you make of that statement? And having this deep experience of your family going up against their family, anong naging reaction mo doon?
Yes, I think it's two things. No, so one is if you're president, there's so much you can do to fight corruption, and there's so much you could have done 3 years ago to fight corruption. No? So I think it is strange to have a president na parang inggit siya sa relista, parang as if mas marami yung kapangyarihan ng nagpo-protesta. Definitely, those who protest have power, and I think we demonstrated that yesterday. But the president has been vested with powers by the people in 2022. 60% of voters put him there, and to say that this is all I can do, I wish I could do more, is really, I think, not commensurate to the responsibility that was thrust on him in 2022, or that was placed on him in 2022. Nobody forced him to run naman. And then on the second level, what's really ironic is that if he said that 53 years ago, he would be arrested, right? So if he had engaged in a rally 53 years ago, he would have been arrested, right? So I think I think performative is the word that's used quite often now to describe a lot of the discourse from our political leaders as far as corruption is concerned. And I think it fits the bill pretty well for President Marcos.
So just to be clear, your group is not really asking the president or the vice president to resign. You're not calling for anybody to resign.
No, what we're calling for is political accountability, right? I think what we want to see is the names to come out. If it turns out that President Marcos and Vice President Sara Duterte are implicated, and I think there's a PCIJ report talking about the campaign contributions of a number of these contractors to them. If it does turn out that they are implicated, and it seems that there's a pretty good chance that they are, then let's kick them out in 2028. Let's use the tools of our democracy to make sure as one voice as Filipinos, because that's the idea of the ballot. All of us have an equal voice. All of us have one vote. Let's kick them out with one voice as the Filipino people, and let's end this story of corruption in the Philippines.
Some incidents of violence happened over at Mendiola and the Ayala Bridge. How does Tindig Pilipinas view that? And the second is, do you know these young ones dressed in black and having a mask over their faces? Meron ba kayo idea kung sino sila?
Right. I think first of all, as Tindig, I don't think we have a stand yet because we kind of got really bugbog kami sa pagod kagabi, no? So we're just catching up on all of the news from Mendiola, from Luneta, all the other rallies that have happened. Just my quick take is I think there are two things to highlight. No, first is at least personally myself and the idea behind the Trillion Peso March is that we're all the organizers are all committed to active nonviolence, right? So engaging in violent protests and riots, that's not something that I personally would ever do. And I would just remind people who do choose to take that route that there are consequences, to be prepared for the consequences of that route. So kung may nag-riot, lalo na kung may nanakit, de dapat talagang managot yung mga gumawa nun, right? So notwithstanding that there were as you were discussing earlier, there are accusations of police brutality. I think those should also be taken very seriously because there is a right to protest, and even when there's dispersal, I think proportionate force should be used. But I think that situation will clarify itself will be clarified over the coming days. But I think the second point that's important to remember is that I think the anger that is the root of both the peaceful protests and the riots come from the same place. No, the riots didn't come from nowhere. The riots are in this context where we're seeing really, really bad flooding, funds diverted from social services, and juxtaposed with a lot of grotesque displays of wealth by people alleged to be involved in the issue. So that anger is the natural response to that. As far as Tindig Pilipinas is concerned, as far as the whole Trillion Peso March is concerned, we wanted to give a venue for people to express that anger in a way that was peaceful, in a way that is within the spirit of the 1987 Constitution. But I also recognize that while, again, none of us would ever do what happened in Mendiola, it comes from a place of, I think, justified anger. Right, so
though there is some concern over the rallies being taken advantage of by other groups who have their own agenda, probably to destabilize the government and all of that. Is there concern on your part?
Definitely, at least as far as the Trillion Peso March was concerned, right? That was something we've had a lot of discussions about how to manage, right? We deployed as many marshals as we could, although if it really was 100,000 people, I don't think we deployed enough marshals in that situation. But and we hope to improve on that in the future. But we were preparing for that situation where what if people are making calls that are very, very outside the realm of the consensus that was arrived at by the organizers. Then we were not training people, but we were tapping people who were trained to gently pacify that kind of situation before it sort of escalates into something more violent. But in terms of the thing you're asking earlier, no, do I know any of these people in masks? I don't know any personally, but I do remember detecting over the last few days, no, and this is why we were taking security very seriously. We were detecting discussions of like Molotov cocktails, wear masks, etc., etc. I wasn't sure how seriously to take it just as like an individual, but as an organizer, we did our best to
where did you hear that? From who?
Social media. No, I think there are a lot of posts. There were a lot of posts on the rallies happening on the 21st. Na yun, black yung suot natin, wear masks, parang obscenities.
So there was a call sent
what was
out.
mentioned earlier. I'm sorry.
Okay, there was a call sent out online.
I don't know if it was a call or if it's just someone trying to look maangas on social media or something. So again, I wasn't sure how to take it,
Okay.
but we were just preparing in case. For example, we put out an advisory to if we discourage people from bringing backpacks, and if they were to bring backpacks, as much as possible, have a like transparent bag so that the security would be aware of like what are the objects you're bringing into the area, right?
Okay.
I think we took that kind of discourse. I think we took seriously on our end to sort of prepare for anyone who might have intentions like that.
And finally, is there another rally coming up? What's next for Tindig Pilipinas?
So definitely, I know we're assessing what happened. We're assessing what happened today. Primarily what happened on EDSA, but I think there's also discussion to be had over the broader context. And there's also going to be Senate hearings again these coming days. No, so we'd want to see what emerges from that, how to respond to that. I definitely think that. I think we're committed to following up on this, but even in our absence, I think protests will probably continue to happen since the issue is far from done. But yes, definitely. I think there was a movement started or not started, but I think that sort of came out in large numbers yesterday, and I think Tindig's commitment is we want to. I don't think we're necessarily at the head of that movement per se. I think it's much broader than just us, but we want to guide that movement towards something that where we can see like genuine consequences as far as corruption is concerned, both legally and politically, as far as elections, legally, as far as cases, convictions.
Well, we will watch out for the movement that has been also started by your group, Tindig Pilipinas. In the meantime, maraming salamat for joining us today. Congratulations on a good turnout yesterday. And we hope to see that some impact on the hearings to come. We have Tindig Pilipinas co-convenor Kiko Aquino-Dee joining us on Morning Matters today.
Marami pang kailangan gawin, pero maraming salamat, Gretchen, and thank you to everyone listening today.